Central Africa region with geopolitical analyst Aaron Ngambi. From escalating violence in the DRC and shifting political fault lines in Cameroon to simmering unrest in Angola and beyond. This is a region that's really seeing quite a lot, both disruption and resilience. Let's say good morning to Aaron Ngambi. Aaron, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on the program.
It was a pleasure. Good morning to you, Peter, and good morning to the listeners this morning.
So, the recent peace agreement, DRC M23 peace deal, and we see these peace deals quite often, and we always have hope. The one mediated in Washington and Doha seemed to offer a path forward, but the M23 appeared to be continuing their attacks, and this is the fear that we had. How do you assess the effectiveness of these agreements now, particularly amid reports that over 300 civilian deaths occurred last month?
Well, these peace deals were bound to actually fail. I'm sorry to say. If you look at what happened in Doha, for example, you had President Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame come together and sit down with the leadership in Doha. But the problem was that there was no representative from the M23 group. And if you remember, Peter, for the longest time, the Rwandese government has refused that it does not fund or sponsor or support M23 rebels. So what were they doing at the peace negotiations in Doha? So the reason why I bring this as a point, it's because any day the peace deal can collapse and Rwanda can say, well, we have no control over M23. So that aside, you look at Washington, D.C. again, the same thing. You had no M23 rebels at the table of negotiations. And secondly, this was mineral for safety deal. America and the Trump administration were only interested in the raw earth minerals that are in the DR Congo. And that was the only motivation for them to broker a deal in the Eastern DR Congo. So that tells you that basically this deal was bound to fail because it was premised on external factors and external players. This is why the M23 rebels now are advancing, gaining more territory, and also causing more mayhem and killing more people. It is very unfortunate, but this was almost predictable.
I remember us having these conversations, excuse me, as those deals were signed. And we raised this exact point that the M23 are not there. And often we forget that it's not just the M23 in the east of the DRC. There are other insurgent groups there, and they're never brought to the table. So if we can figure it out, and we are not on the inside track of these things as the politicians are, how could they have missed it? Or were they just going through the motions?
Well, I think the problem was actually the motivations on all the parties at play. You made it a point there when you said that we did not see the M23 rebels, but they're not the only problematic rebel group or fighting insurgents in the region. You also FDLR, the ones that Kagame is so obsessed with, and he does not want them back in Rwanda because supposedly they are linked to the genocide of 1993. So you have that group as well in the Eastern DR Congo. And then you actually have the RDF, the Rwandese Defense Force, accused of being on the ground in the Eastern DR Congo. So there are many factions and many groups that should have been brought to the table as well. It doesn't matter even if they're just a tiny fraction of what the problem is, but they need to be at the table and the problem needs to be discussed by the players that are actually fighting each other rather than external factors, external players that have a different motive.
To Cameroon now. The Constitutional Council there has upheld the decision to bar Maurice Kamto from the October election, and this is a move that's raising serious questions about electoral fairness and comes as President Biya, who's now 92, seeks another term. What does this tell us about the political trajectory and institutional integrity in Yaoundé at this time?
Well, Peter, it seems like your favorite African president is not going anywhere. At 92 years old, he wants an 80th term of office. It is just disgusting, and it is. Now, the reason why Maurice Kamto has been barred from running, remember, this would have been his second attempt. He ran first against Paul Biya in 2018 under a political party called the Cameroonian Resonance Movement, the CRM. And so what the Electoral Commission did in Cameroon was they barred that party from participating in the elections, saying that the party does not have local, meaning municipality, as well as parliamentary representation. Therefore, it did not qualify to be on the ballot. So under that pretext, they stopped him from being a candidate. And in 2018, he came out second from the incumbent. And so Maurice Kamto was really promising. He's been thrown in jail a few times. He's much younger than the 92-year-old president. And because of that, I think he's the only person that they think was a real threat to the establishment. So they had to buy his party from contesting, but the party actually took the case to the Constitutional Council. Unfortunately, the Constitutional Council has upheld that ban. Therefore, the CRM will not be on the ballot. But also, Maurice Kamto attempted to run on a different political party. And what has happened is that even that political party has not been allowed to be on the ballot. You remember we had about 81 candidates that were interested in running in the presidency of Cameroon in October this year, but only about 13 of them have been allowed to be on the ballot. And out of the 7 women, only 1 female has been allowed. So this is definitely an election that will be a sham, and it will be nothing free and fair about this election in Cameroon.
Do you think Cameroon is not reading the room properly? I mean, if you think about protests in Kenya, protests in Mozambique, protests in other countries, Sudan, you name it, more and more young people are just not putting up with this. And it seems that the ingredients for resistance are there in Cameroon. Do you think that we might see the same kind of action playing out? Each country always thinks, not in our country will that happen, and yet it does.
I think that it's a blessing in disguise that Paul Biya and his party and the people in government and the powers that be wants to take the Cameroonian people for granted. I think that this will be a catalyst and a recipe for the North and the South, the Anglo and the Francophone Cameroonians to come together and fight the regime. This will happen. It's just a matter of time. The young people are fed up of this. The ordinary Cameroonian people do not want anything to do with this, but it seems like the powers that be want to still impose their rule on the people. And so they've done divide and rule and tried to split people on tribal and regional basis. But I think what will happen now going forward is that when people are fed up, it doesn't matter where they come from. They'll look at the regime as the enemy of the people and that they're fed up with it and they'll fight it. And the same thing will play out, just like you said, as we've seen in other places, especially among young people.
Well, talking about protests, I mean, we've seen those in Angola recently, and this was sparked by a fuel subsidy removal, resulting in at least 29 and some 22 deaths. Some say it could be well over 30, and over 1,200 arrests. And this really does underscore some of the grievances that go far beyond fuel prices, I believe. Yes, some of it was hijacked by young people looting. But I do think that it does suggest societal tensions that are coming through in these protests. And I wonder what your thoughts are on this, because this is a story that seems to be playing itself out more and more in nations across the continent. The young people, as we were describing, just not putting up with it.
Well, and we're talking about Angola of all places, Peter. So you can imagine Angola has been peaceful since 1975 when they gained independence. We never heard of anything of this sort in Angola. And the fuel prices that we are talking about the subsidies that have been removed, the fuel prices have gone up from, I think it's 33 cents to 44 cents US dollars per liter. I mean, this is not like a huge increment. But so this is just a sign that people, young people who have no jobs, young people who cannot make ends meet, young people who are fed up of the high cost of living are now beginning to realize, but they have to look for an excuse. They have to look for a reason why they need to protest, why they need to go out on the streets. So by and large, Angola under the MPLA government, which, by the way, it's a liberation movement. It's a liberation party since independence of the country. They are now facing something that they've never seen before since the inception of the republic. So this is the country at the crossroads, and they have to make a decision. These people in power, do they either perpetuate their stay in power? Do they go for reforms that really change the material conditions of the people? This is something that we're yet to see. But by and large, you're right. The young people are not putting up with this. There's so much corruption. There's so much uncertainty in the economies of some of these countries, and people are standing up now.
Central African Republic President Touadera has announced that he'll be running for a third term after 2023's constitutional amendment removed term limits. Here's another story that plays out. They're all quite happy when they said you can have 2 terms, and then as they come towards the end of the second term, like magic, like there's a script, the constitution gets changed, and then they try for third terms, and before you know what's happening, you've got Yoweri Museveni's story playing out. Your thoughts about democratic norms and regional stability on the continent, I won't even just say the region, as a result of these kinds of things?
The Central African Republic is a sad story. We have a president again who is the best excuse of failed leadership that we have in Africa. He comes into office under the mandate that he only serve 2 terms, and then after seeing that he wants to stay forever, he lifts the term limits through a sham referendum, constitutional reforms that take place. And now he wants to go for a third term. He's 68 years old now. And I can guarantee you, Peter, I can come back here after another 7 years, because he's under that referendum. He's also changing term, not only removing term limits, but he's changing the number of years per term for the presidency from 5 years to 7 years. So I can come back and tell you that in the next 7, 8 years, he's going to go not only for a third term, he'll go for a fourth term and try to go for a fifth term and have a Yoweri Museveni in that country. Now, this is the same thing that is happening in the Ivory Coast with Ouattara. He's done the same thing. He came under the mandate that he would only serve 2 terms, and then he took his eligibility question before the Constitutional Court. And of course, with the judges that are appointed by the executive, and these judges ruled that, well, his first term could not really count as per term. They gave all sorts of legal jargon to justify that. And now he is going for a third term, and he's lifted term limits on the presidency. So unfortunately, we see this over and over play out in some of these African leaders. And I think that we are tired of this. The continent needs to go for a leadership that is principled, a leadership that really keeps its promise, and a leadership that speaks the language of Uhuru Kenyatta. I think it's Kenyatta who said that there is life after the presidency. After 2 terms, these leaders need to realize they can still be somewhat important or significant figures, but they don't seem to see that. They want to stay in office, and some of them even want to die in office.
Aaron, perhaps finally, is there anything on the radar for you in this region that we should be watching in the coming week?
Yes, I think as you are aware, Zambia and Malawi now are officially on the list of African countries that the United States has placed this bond on travel or tourist visas. So if you want to visit the United States and you're from any of those two countries. And I think other countries will be are supposed to have about 15,000 US dollars. This does not make sense. It's utter nonsense. How many Zambians or Malawans travel to America on vacation? It's unthinkable. I think that Trump is playing a card that is nothing but what we know already of his perception in terms of African leadership and African countries. And also, don't forget that he has placed 30% tariffs on all goods that are exported from South Africa to the United States. And he has even hinted that he perhaps will not attend the G20 meeting in South Africa in November. So these are some of the things that we have to look out for, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. Malawi goes to the elections in September, just next month. And it seems like the former president there, who's 84 years old, is likely to bounce back to power. So much to look out for in the region.
Aaron, it's always good talking to you, my brother. Thanks so much indeed, and we'll chat to you again next week. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. Have a good one.